Okay. What we're going to learn today is how to tell my browser some helpful quotes, and then we're going to save it to the computer so that when we come back and refresh the page, they're still there. No server, all that stuff, just all local storage. Cool. So what I have is I have a basic HTML file. It's got some basic styling, and it's got some script. Whenever the window fires the load event, we're going to run, let's actually just make this function called main. So whenever the window fires the load event, we're going to call this function called main. Main is some async function where we're going to log we are active. If I load the page, we are active at the right spot at the right time, blah, blah, blah. Cool. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have some form. We're going to want to have some input. Maybe this is the author name. Okay. And then I wonder if this will work. Quote. And I want to do a text area. What does this look like in our browser? Cool. Then let's make this a little bit bigger, maybe. Boom. And then in CSS, let's make it just some basic styling. Boom. And then we could even, and then do ID. Cool. So we can, instead of having these things nested inside of a label, we can have them side by side. And let's call this some sort of input group. Oops. Cool. Let's go ahead and define that. But it's going to be 100% of its parent. It's going to display flex direction. It's going to be direction. This is going to be column. And boom, boom. Cool. And then just to make it a little pretty, why not? Add some padding on there. Cool. And I need a way to submit this form. And let's say I'm also going to want a way to reset. Cool. So I'm going to have some author's name, foo, quote, whatever that's about. Reset. I can clear it. Cool. I'm going to submit it, and then it does its native thing. That's not what we want. We could set up some sort of server that's listening for GET requests, then it reads this stuff, or maybe we render some other. We're not going to do any of that. What we're going to do instead is first, we're going to listen for this form's submit events. We could add some sort of, get some water. Hydro homies. You know what I'm saying? So, we could add some ID here, make it identifiable. But since there's only one and this document's kind of short, we can say form equal. Actually, we'll do it on inside of main, just to make sure the DOM's loaded. I'm pretty sure it would be by this point, but just to be safe, wait till it's loaded. And then say form is going to equal document query selector. Give me the first element in the DOM that passes this basically CSS query, right? If you were going to style something and you saw, and you wrote this, right? Or how we wrote this, and CSS applied some styling, we're going to do the same thing in JavaScript and find that element. And then we're going to say form.add event listener. When you have a submit, I want to prevent the default. And I just want to log. We submitted. I don't know how to spell. You know, understand. We submitted. Sweet. Okay. Cool. Now, what I want to do is I want to get the values out of this form. I've already been a nice person to my browser and to screen readers and named things, and I have labels and stuff, right? So now what I want to do is I want to create some I want to create a new FormData object out of the target of this submit event. So what is a FormData object? Let's go ahead and learn about that. MDN, place to go. Search for a new HTML form element. Blah, 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 blah. Boom. Okay, so basically, this guy right here, this FormData guy, says, hey. I understand how this browser thing works. And if you name these things, even inputs that are type files, I'm going to understand how to encode all that, right? And it's got some sort of API here. We can append, we can get, and what I want to do first is for the key and the value of my FormData.entries. For each of these pairings in my entries, what is that? Key value pairs contained in the object. So, for each of my entries, key being the name of the input, value being the value when this form was submitted, I want to console log that. Right, cool. So now, let's go to refresh. Author name. Some awesome quote that you cares. Okay, key author, value, author, name. Yeah, the value at the time when I submitted it did say author name. Yep, cool. Key, quote, value, some whatever, right? Cool. Yep. Let's try a different name just to make sure it's not, hard-coded. Key author, so the key of this entry, the name value, right? Key author, value of that key is foobar, the current value of this input. Key quote, value something else, the current value of this text area. right? So what else could we do with this form data? Well, I could also get these values out of it, right? I could say the author name is going to be the key, right? And then I could also do the quote. Quote, right? And let's go ahead and prove that that's what's happening. Oops. Make sure I save it. Okay, I have a bad habit of not saving things. And then you're like, why isn't it working? You're like, oh, I never click Control Save. Tim Foobar. That's something inspirational I said. Inspirational Tim once said, Foobar. Cool. So now I have some box that has author name and some box that has quotes. Two things I want to do at this point in time. Well, a few things. First, I want to put this information on the screen. I want to put it inside of, let's actually move this up here. That shouldn't change anything. Nope. Okay. So when I submit, I want to put them as items inside of this element here, right? So eventually, each time I click submit, I'll have a new entry here. So when I do Tim and Foobar, I'll click submit and it'll put some sort of elements in this app. How do we do that? Well, because it has an ID, we can just say, hey, go and get this element by its ID. Whenever we do this, I want a function that is going to take in the name and quote, and it's going to return to me some DOM element that I can append to the app. Create quote element. So given some object of author and quote, I am going to return to my caller some element. And this is going to be some div. And I'm going to create another element. Let's call this one the author element. Create element. Let's make this one an h2 const and quote L. And let's make this a block quote. Cool. So now I want the author L's inner text is going to equal the author. The quote element inner text is going to equal the quote. And the element, we're going to append child author element append child quote element. And we're going to return the element. Cool. So quote element given author and quote will return some div element that has all of this. So now I want to create quote element. My quote is going to be my quote above. And my author is going to be my author name. Cool. And now I want to append on my app this new element. And then let's go ahead and do form dot reset, just to clear out the above. We get Tim some quote. I do another one. Cool. So, but the problem is, let's go ahead and see. The problem is when I refresh, I lose those. So what I want to do is find a way for me to save these to this computer. And there's a thing called LocalStorage. The big thing here is that the data is stored across browser sessions. So what I can do is I have this data. I could also, let's just hold this as in data. I could also say add to storage. So given, let's say some quote object. Oops, not returning an array. Given some thing, we're going to, what can I save here? Does it have to be a string? The keys and values stored are always in the UTF string format, which 2 bits, as with objects, integers keys are, okay, cool. So I want to, what does that mean? That means whatever interface we're gonna have in this local storage has to be, I think, some string. I think that's what it's saying. So I'm gonna read it currently. What's the current value? Storage. How do I get this? Boom, get item, cool. Get item, quotes. And we're gonna say that quotes is some JSON string. So let's go ahead and parse it into an object. And then I want to create a new quotes list, which would be quotes.concat quote. Cool. And now I want to set this as some new string. Okay. That's a lot. So what we're going to do first is we're going to, given some quote object, it's a quote and an author, given some quote object, we're going to go and get the current string value of quotes in our local storage. This is some browser thing that lets us store strings. We're going to parse that into a JSON object. We're going to create a new list by adding all of our quotes plus this last one. And then we're going to set the current value of quotes in our local storage as the string value of our new quotes. So I should be able to do, I've appended it, and now let me go ahead and add to storage. Okay. Oh, quotes is null. Shoot, magoosh. That's what I thought would happen. Let's do that. Okay, so the problem was this returned nothing, and then this blew up. So we're saying, okay, go and get quotes, or go and get this. And then we're going to save it. Then I refresh. It doesn't show up. And that's because we don't pre-populate. Oops. Why in the heck? Why in the heck? Ah! Pre-pop. Pre-pop. We're not going to get into how to spell. Okay. We're going to when we first start, we're going to pre-populate this app with the current values in local storage. So let's go ahead and say my storage string is this guy right here. We could make this a function, but we're not going to for this. We're just going to copy paste. So this gives me a list. And then what I want to do is for each of these items, move that up so I can call it. Okay, for each of my quotes now, I want to append them to this fragment. So, just like we can create an element here and then append it to the app, I can, as I'm iterating over these quotes, create the element and append it to this document fragment. Document fragment is something I'm not even sure if it's helpful anymore, but we're gonna do this and then append the fragment to the app all at once. So I go through and I'm building this fragment, and I'm going to append that fragment to the DOM, which means all of its siblings are now, all of its children are now children of the app. Let's prove that. Well, we're not calling it. Boom. Tim is going to say something else. And if I refresh, it's still there. Whoops. Jesus. Be cool, my dudes. Paul. Seriously. Be cool, my dudes. Boom. We now have a way to, given some form, an arbitrary amount of key and then input values or text area values, right? We can grab those values via our form data. We can get values out of it. We can create elements and append to the DOM. And we can pre-populate based on that storage. And most browsers will have this little storage thing, and we can see my local storage is some value here. And if I believe I can, yeah, see, it knows I'm saving JSON, so it parses it. That's why I thought I could save it, but it knows. Cool. And then I think I can, no, I can't delete them individually. But I could probably delete. And if I refresh, it's all gone. Cool. So today we learned how to create a form. This form has some sort of values that are named. How to get those values into an object that our browser understands. Then how to get the values out of that object that we want. We learned how to create an element. And we learned a little bit about document fragments. I strongly recommend you look into, on your own, local storage, look into form data, and look into document fragments. Local storage lets us store things client-side. Form data lets us parse and understand forms natively, and document fragments are just a cool little thing to kind of geek out on and nerd out on. Hope that was helpful.